So I just figured out something. I finished The Man Who Lived Underground by Richard Wright, and I figured out that if you like happy endings, Richard Wright is not your boy, okay? Richard Wright is going to leave you at the end like life sucks, okay? And goodbye. Beautiful people, thank you for tuning back in. I am Darnaya, Darice, first name, middle name. Now, I got off of work and I have finished another Richard Wright's book, which is my second read. If you've been following me and you've read, or not read, if you watched my September TBR, then you know I read Native Son last month. It's October 2025, whenever you're watching this, okay? Last month I read Native Son. This was my very first Richard Wright read, and this I rated 5-star. This I'm going to give a 4.75, and I'll tell you why in just a few. Now, I am standing up because I like the freedom, okay? I didn't want to sit down for this video. I wanted to stand. I wanted to move around. Because if you know me, I use my hands to talk, okay? I got to act out the words I'm saying so you understand the intensity of the words I'm saying, if that makes sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? No. Don't mind me, y'all. Don't mind me. All right, so in this video, I wanted to compare the main characters, okay? So in Native Son, you have Bigger Thomas, who's the main character in here. And in The Man Who Lived Underground, you have Fred Daniels. Okay, so I talked about Bigger last month, and I'll get into some comparisons, similarities, and differences, but I wanted to go over this book really quickly. If you haven't read this book is following another black male. If you know Richard Thomas, he's going to write from his perspective, rightfully so. Okay, so we're following another black male. This black male name is Fred Daniels. And Fred, the story starts out, Fred is just walking home, okay? It's a little after, it's a little in the day, and he is coming home from work, and he's thinking, oh, I got a little money in my pocket. I've cleaned, or he's like, he does the garden or the lawn for a lady and husband named Mr. and Mrs. Wooten, right? And so while he is walking home, he is thinking about going home to his wife who is pregnant, and he is also thinking about the bills he have to pay, right? It's like, we just got paid, now I gotta go spend this on bills. So out of nowhere, all of a sudden, there are these cops that come up. There are these cops that take hold of him, and he's like, what's going on? And he was like, it's you, you know, they're getting control of him, and he's out of the woodworks. And there's like, he's like, stop, boy, where are you coming from? You know how back in the day they called grown men boys, right? And they like, boy, where are you coming from? You coming from Mr. Peabody, right? And so there's a double murder that happened next to the family he actually works for. It just so happened that he's coming from that place, and so long and behold, he gets arrested. He gets beaten. This is at the very beginning, okay? And if you read the synopsis, you'll get the hang of it. He's getting tortured and beaten, like, oh, tell us what you did, tell us where you're coming from. And he is like dumbfounded, because he's like, what are you guys talking about? I'm just coming from work. Mrs. Wooten and Miss Wooten, he's remembering, is not home. And so he's like, I sing in the choir for Reverend Daniels or Davis. I think it's Reverend Davis. And he's like, I'm a churchgoer, I'm a good person, good man, just trying to get home to my wife. But they keep telling him, like, you committed this double murder, tell us how you did it. And he's getting punched and beaten and all this. And long and behold, he did not commit the crime. He keeps saying, like, I don't know what you're talking about, I didn't commit this crime. And they saying he's lying. And that's how the story opens up. This story is short of a short story. Now, you see I have a little bit of reading to go that's left. because this story actually ends on page 159. This is the Library of America's copy, and this story was actually not published while Richard was alive. Okay, it was published in 2021, and so they added an insert in the back of Memories of My Grandmother, and he's in the back after the story. He's like talking about his grandmother and how he came up with this story. So this is actually a short story. You can really finish this in a day, on the weekend, if you had time. Obviously, I have to break mine up. It took me about 3 days to read, splitting it up, but it's broken up into 3 parts. And what I realize is, what you find is that Fred is kind of similar to Bigger. Okay, Fred, he's getting accused of something he didn't do, but of course, just like Bigger, he's dealing with fear. He's dealing with oppression. He's dealing with still in this time, you're dealing with belief or not belief. And in both books, in both stories, with both characters, in different ways, the white male police officers don't believe the main character, okay? And he's telling the truth. He's actually innocent, but he's not being believed. He gets forced to sign a confession, and after he gets forced to sign a confession, they like, okay, to make it seem like we're treating him right, let him go see his pregnant wife, and his pregnant wife ends up during his quick visit with the policeman with him, ends up going into labor, and she gets rushed to the hospital, and then ultimately he escapes and goes in the sewer. And then in this whole story, you're basically following him in part 2 in the sewer, his journey in the sewer. He's breaking down walls and bricks, and then he goes and ends up committing crimes, or what this society will call crimes. And so what happens is he's going through this journey, and he's contemplating, he's hearing church people sing underground, because he's like going through the basements of building, creating holes and things, and he is finding and questioning himself, like, why are they constantly singing sadness of guilt, and why are they living this way when he once was singing in the choir. He also runs into a situation where someone is sleeping on the job, and he ends up getting food in different ways. He ends up hurting himself more, and you find that with Bigger and Native Son. So Bigger, if you haven't read Native Son, Bigger does commit a hefty crime, okay? He commits a hefty crime, and he is actually guilty, but he ends up hiding in plain sight. So Bigger continues to go about his day as normal, go about his routine. He continues to go to work in order to hide in plain sight from the big crime that he actually committed. And then he decides to commit more crimes, because it sort of gives him freedom, and he's laughing. They both go through these moments where they're like laughing to themselves, because they know, okay, Bigger knows, well, the white men, they're not going to believe that a black man did this by himself or did it at all. And also Fred is laughing, because they're like, oh, I'm hiding, I'm right here, and they can't see me, or they can't find me, and so they both kind of take control of their lives in different ways of extremism, right? You're going through moral complexities. You're dealing with internal conflict. With Fred, he's constantly dealing with, should I turn myself in? What is right? What is wrong? And he actually wants to turn himself in, because he wants people to know, no, I got away with this. Even though I'm innocent of this crime, I actually did these crimes. And he eventually goes back and tries to convince the police officers of what he did, and they're still not believing him. They're laughing at him. And so you see two sides of a coin, really of the same coin, because both are dealing with fear. Both are dealing with oppression. Both have families, but Bigger's family is like his immediate family. His mom, his sister, his brother. And, he ends up not being with them because of his actions. And then you have Fred, who has a wife and a child along the way, and he disappears. And so he is dealing with one reality, and Bigger is dealing with another reality, but it's all similar when you look at it. Now the difference is you have, I feel like Bigger did the way he thought, his internal thoughts and his actions, he lived like it was, like he lived reality as it was. He wasn't fooled, he knew what it was. Whereas I feel like Fred lives still, even though he sees what's happening, he doesn't take root, he doesn't take point. He still has like this hope or desire that these men who tortured me, beat me, will believe me at some point. They have some good nature where they would come to some logical sense when they have shown you this whole time, this whole story, that they do not operate off of morality. They do not have logical sense. They're thinking they're smart when they're not. You're outsmarting them in a sense. But because he is felt or looked upon as to be lesser than, that's how he carries himself. And you kind of see Bigger play on that, because he plays into this character, into this role, like, yes sir, yes ma'am, yes I know how to do it. But he knows, he's like, oh, I'm just play into it. Whereas Fred really takes on that persona of turning into cowering and going to kind of little boy stage, if you will, little boy character, if you will, when it comes to engaging with these other people in society, where he's a grown man. And you see Bigger plays on the aspect, because they know, okay, this is what's acceptable, so I'm gonna play along with it. And so you kind of see those similarities, you also kind of see those differences. Both of these let me tell you, both of these ended tragically. Both of these ended tragically. Like, poor Bigger, it was no hope for him, because he knew, okay, he just kept doing stuff, like extreme stuff. Like, if you read this, read Native Son. It's long, but it's good. Now Fred, if let me know if you read this. First of all, let me know if you read this in the comments. But if you haven't read it, Fred is going to tick you off a little bit, because he could have easily, you could have got away with this. Like, nothing had to happen for you, but something happens to him at the end, and you're like, really, Fred? Really? Now you need to look at the policeman, but it was unnecessary. Like, he just, you wanted to be like, no, stand up. You know, it made me think of a quote that one had said, Frederick Douglass had said, but I believe I also heard and saw Martin Luther King Jr. say this, but nobody rides my back unless I bend over and let him. And Fred was just was just bending over, and was like, and so he was so not complacent, he was so obedient, if you will, in that sense. In a lot of his character throughout the story, especially in part 1 and part 3, he wasn't as strong. He didn't fight. Like, Bigger had a certain external fight about him, whether it was fighting his boys or vice versa, or coming face to face and like squaring up. You like, what's up? You know, Bigger had a little bit more external fight, and Fred, he did not have that fight back, that external fight. He just let the things happen to him. And that's where Bigger found his freedom, because he realized, oh, I can just go around and do what I want to do, in a sense, ultimately knowing that eventually I'll probably be held accountable. So accountability, Richard addressed in both of these, and so it's just done in interesting ways. If you've learned or read about W.B. Du Bois's dual consciousness, you also kind of get a play on that in these books with Fred and with Bigger. You're dealing with fear. You're dealing with, again, fate. It is so good. Like, these are some good stories. Now, the only reason I rated this a 4.75 is because when it gets to part 2, you're really just following his journey underground, and it's good. But I found that part 1 and part 3 had more of the dialogue with the different people he was interacting with, and though they were funny, I could feel the emotion on the page. Richard writes dialogue so well. Like, it felt so real. It felt like, okay, I'm seeing this going on, I'm feeling it going on. I could feel the every punch, every hit, the fall to the ground. I understand the intensity of the situation. He does that so well. But the journey of following him through the sewer and the different things that he was doing, it just not it didn't get really dry. It was a good story, but it just, it kind of faltered for me for a bit because it stayed in narration for a long time. But other than that, these were great stories. Again, I will read every piece of work by Richard Wright. I want to get his autobiography. I want to read Black Boy next if I can, so I'm gonna try to get my hands on that. But yeah, I'm so excited. My October TBR, come on, I'm knocking these down. Okay, so I read 2 books so far. I read Promise Boys by Nix Brooks. I did a review on that. If you haven't watched that, go watch it. Okay, go watch it. Let me know what you think about it. It is a YA mystery. And then this was my second book. Okay, let me show you what I'm gonna read next, and then I'll let you go. All right, so the book I plan to read next, and I will most likely start this tomorrow. Right now it's Monday, October 6th. I'm going to start this Tuesday, October 7th. This is Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos of Community by Martin Luther King Jr. This is still profound and relevant today. I have not read this work. I encourage you to read and listen to his speeches that he did in 1967, because a lot of times we get spewed the propaganda, so we get pushed to constantly listen about the dream, and that's all you get spewed. But please listen to his speeches. I've Been to the Mountaintop, and What Is Your Life's Blueprint, he gave to a school, a class of students, and you see his perspective starts to adjust. Even at one point towards the end of his life, he said, I feel like I'm running my people into a burning house. And he's trying to tell you to pay attention, become aware, okay? Organize, and do what we need to do. So I'm going to read this, and I'm going to take some good notes. Let me know what you're reading this week in the chat. And until next time, in between time, always remember to keep rising.
I'm telling you that there ain't no other way. Pack your bags and then you will go